Hi. I felt called to come on here and talk about this because this is something that I've been wanting to share for a while, and it is officially 1 year since I had the biggest ego death, rebirth, higher alignment experience than I've ever had in my entire life. I have officially gone through 2 spiritual awakenings. If you know, you know. The second one is just, I don't even know how to describe it. It's also 2 in the morning. I might post this, I might not. This may be like several parts. Who knows? But it's fresh in my mind, and I've been nudged by spirit to talk about it for a while now. I left my home in Oregon to travel to New Mexico. My initial intention, I guess I should go over first, my initial intention was to drive to New Mexico, explore New Mexico for a little bit, and then drive to Texas, where my friends were going to be. And I guess I'll also talk about the setup of like how this went down. So my friends, my 2 former best friends, were going to get married and move to Texas. One of them has family in Texas, and our plan originally was that we were all going to drive down there and we were going to stay there together, and on the way we were going to go to New Mexico. New Mexico means a lot to me and has a lot of significance because my great aunt lived in New Mexico for a long time, and some of my family lived there as well, and I've always felt called to go there. And Spirit was nudging me towards New Mexico. Before I left, there were a lot of nudges to travel and a lot of signs that no matter what, Spirit would support me on my journey. I literally was told that if I left town with an empty tank of gas and none of my things, that Spirit would still provide for me. I am so grateful and so blessed for that. But I did work my ass off and save up money so that I would be prepared for this trip. I saved about $1,000, and then I had money on top of that before I left. What ended up happening with my friends is they decided that they were going to delay their trip because they weren't quite ready, and so they ended up staying here until Christmas. I was like, whatever, I'll just go, I'll see what happens, I'll have fun, I've been waiting. I could have waited a little longer. I could have. But in the long run, it ended up working out and being okay. Like the timing of it all. So I worked my ass off. I sold most of my belongings and I packed everything up into my new car. But it was red and I absolutely freaking loved it. So I packed all of my things up in there. I gave my cat to my parents, and my sister and her boyfriend ended up actually taking my cat in for a longer amount of time. And I said goodbye to my friends. I said goodbye to my family. and I left. When I left, I left with the intention of being gone for a long time, at least until maybe Christmas, maybe longer. And I had the intention of potentially moving to New Mexico or wherever I found that I loved. Because I've been here all my life, and also because my friends were doing it, and also because there were so many signs and a million reasons that I could give you, but that's not the point. So I drove the first day about 8 hours. It was very interesting because along the side of the road there were a lot of I saw someone drop off puppies on the side of the road. I saw someone selling dogs and someone selling cats. Very interesting signs along the way. I also saw a rainbow the day that I left. A massive rainbow over the water. And leaving Oregon felt like exiting out of a portal. It was insane. And I stayed that first night in a cheap Motel 6, and it was horrible. It was horrible. Not ideal to sleep in, at all. But the first night I started to feel the guilt and a lot of feelings, a lot of sadness, homesickness. It was extremely hard to leave my cat. She is a part of me and she is like my counterpart, and so it was very hard to leave her here, and I cried a lot the day that I left her here. Kind of an underlying reason as well was that I felt like Oregon held me to it, and I felt like I was very pulled to stay here, and that made me want to rebel against that. But ended up driving that second day from Eastern Oregon down through from Eastern Oregon through Idaho and through Utah, and I got to southern Utah, and I stayed in a hotel out there. Hi. I'm gonna go on with my story. I know there's gonna be a lot of rambling throughout, but not too stressed about it, just gonna let it flow. So like I said, that first night I stayed at a little motel, and then I headed down through Idaho to Utah. The second day I started out in a really good mood. I was really energetic. I was feeling better. I was like, you know what, it feels good to detach from Oregon and move on. And I had kind of already detached the day before, but to continue the release was good. I do have to say, I tried to kind of close things off before I left. I'm looking at leaves. I tried to close things off between myself and who I knew, and who things that I needed to say and do, and I just I think I put too much time and energy into trying to say goodbye. I made it and I'm a Cancer. I'm very dramatic. So I wrote letters. I said goodbye to my old self, which I knew that I needed to do, but I wrote letters. I reached out to everyone that, like, I knew and told them I was going on this trip. And at first I wasn't going to tell anyone about my intention to potentially move, but I slowly introduced the idea to people that there's a potential that I could stay there. And yes, it was pretty delusional. I was gonna say slightly, but it was pretty delusional, and I can admit that now. Tasia back then would not have been able to admit that. That's me, by the way, if you didn't know, I'm Tasia. But so I, like, wrote my grandparents a letter thanking them for everything and just, like, expressing my gratitude. And then I wrote a letter to my mom thanking her for everything. And my sister, I'll never forget this, my sister was like, "Are you planning your death?" And I know that, like, sounds really dark, but, like, obviously she was not being serious, but I was like, but kind of serious at the same time. Like, she was concerned. And I was like, no, I just had things that I wanted to say, had things that I wanted to get off my chest. And honestly, like, it really helped me with the, like, death and rebirth process and the ego process, because, like, there was a huge part of me that I left behind. And there was a lot of growth that happened throughout this trip. But anyways, so said my goodbyes. When I drove out of Oregon, I drove past, like, all of the places I had lived and been in where, like, with people that I had been with, where I had, like, not so great memories. And I just, like, said goodbye to those places. Not, like, it was pretty rushed, but yeah. So the second day I felt a lot better. I felt like I had let go of a lot, and I headed towards southern Utah. So going through Idaho, it was pretty, like, not barren, but, like, there just wasn't much. There's not much out in Idaho. And so going through there was very, like, peaceful and quiet. And then you get into Utah and you get towards, like, Salt Lake, and there are so many people. And all of a sudden I was like, I feel like all of a sudden I was on a highway and there were so many cars, so many people driving past me and with me and around me. And I was, like, in my peaceful little bubble, like, listening to my podcast or book or whatever. And then all of a sudden it's like, I'm, like, in this, like, rush of a world. And it was super overwhelming. I did have a panic attack, but I pushed through. And I remember debating on whether I wanted to, like, go even further, but I ended up staying in southern Utah that night. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna get a nice hotel. I'm gonna spoil myself and, like, get, like, a pizza and just relax. And that was really nice. It was nice to have, like, that little treat, because the night before I had a shitty hotel and I needed a little bit of pampering. The next day I drove all day, all the way over to Colorado, just slightly, and then down to New Mexico. Those states are, like, massive, and it took a long time. I think the third day I ended up driving, like, almost 12 hours because it was a lot. And I got to Albuquerque, New Mexico that night. Honestly, like, it was a good feeling, a really good feeling to finally be there and land there. A little bit creepy going into New Mexico, because you, like, come in on the back roads kind of, and I remember there being, like, wild dogs, and it was just, like, very interesting. I did my research though, so I knew what to expect. But yeah, so made it to Albuquerque, made it to downtown Albuquerque, made it to my hotel. That night, the first night there, I'm in the hotel and I swear there was a cockroach. Just like right before I'm about to go to sleep. I was like, fuck this. Like, no. And so they changed my room and they gave me like a discount, or I think it was like a second night for free or something. But so I ended up staying 2 nights there. By the way, I forgot to mention this at the beginning, but this entire trip I was sick. I was not feeling good. I should have waited. There were so many signs that I should have just waited. But I had the worst cough that I think I've ever had in my life throughout this entire trip. And it didn't get better until like weeks after I got back. But I'll explain that too. But I needed to rest because I was sick. And so I stayed like 2 days at this hotel. I ended up going out to breakfast one of the mornings. But yeah, it was very like, I don't know, Albuquerque is kind of like, it's like if you've ever been to like Portland. I don't know why I'm describing this. It's like a downtown city. It's a downtown city. And with mountains in the background. Still beautiful. Very busy, and there's homeless people. Just like there's homeless people everywhere, but I wouldn't live in Albuquerque. It's very much like not my kind of living. I also just like don't like city living at all. But yeah. So I left Albuquerque to go up to Santa Fe. The third day I went and like I went and did a little shopping. I went to a little thrift store and got a couple things because I really wanted to like experience what people typically wear there. I know it's like not that much different from Oregon, but I wanted to kind of like see what people would normally wear. And then I went to a bookstore, a spiritual bookstore, which was amazing. I got some really amazing books and candles and little things. I wish I could go back there because it was beautiful. But yeah, so I went there and then I went up to Santa Fe, where it was kind of a drive. It was like a half a day of driving, like 3-ish hours. But I went up there and so I get up to Santa Fe and okay, this is the first time I saw a New Mexico sunset, and it was the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen in my life. And then I got to the house that I was house sitting at. The people I was house sitting for were really, really sweet. A little bit particular, but very sweet. And I was grateful that I had somewhere to stay for a few days that like didn't cost me anything. I was just watching their house and their cat, and I was able to stay there. So, and that kept being my excuse, like to leave in the first place. My excuse kept being, I have to leave so I can go house sit for these people. Like, that was my excuse, even though I didn't really have to. But, yeah, so I got there, I had dinner with them, and then I stayed the first night there with them. They showed me around, showed me everything that I needed to remember and needed to do. And then the next morning, I was up before they left, but they left the next day. And my plan while I was staying there was to explore Santa Fe a little bit and then go up to Taos, because Taos was the place that I was like, that was my ultimate goal. My ultimate destination was Taos, and I still hadn't gotten there, okay? And I had been in New Mexico for like almost a week. And so the first night, like right after they left, we got a huge snowstorm. Huge. We were snowed in. Some of New Mexico lost power. It was insane. And that was, I believe, the night after they left was the night of the election last year. So they ended up leaving. I was inside. There wasn't a whole lot for me to do. Also not a whole lot of food. I just ate what I could. But it was nice to like experience a house that was like wealthy and beautiful. And there was a lot of like beautiful, beautiful art in this house. I might post pictures. We'll see. Might post some pictures in the comments, but yeah, beautiful, gorgeous house full of art from all over the world, and full of like, I don't know if you've seen like the rugs that look very like Aztec, or like they just have like beautiful patterns on them. It's a specific type of rug. Those are New Mexico rugs, is how I think of them, and they're really well known there. And they were all over the house. And the outside of their house was also really beautiful because they had a really beautiful view. And the sunsets were just amazing. So I just stayed inside. I watched movies. I hung out with their cat. I just chilled. It's the second night that they were gone. Mind you, I also forgot to mention, New Mexico, some of New Mexico is very, 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 very high in elevation. So I not only was sick with a cold and a cough, I was having oxygen deprivation because we were so high up. And they gave me these like supplements that actually help with the elevation. But God, elevation headaches are the worst. I don't know if anyone listening to this has experienced that, but they are the worst. And I had to get those like cans of oxygen that you get at the store to like help me be able to breathe. But like doing anything exhausted me because of the lack of oxygen. And so getting out and doing stuff was hard. But regardless of anything negative I say, New Mexico is beautiful. It's a beautiful place, and I'll explain more about that. But so, the third night I ended up ordering food because I had nothing left to make for dinner. There was nothing. And so I ended up ordering a burrito. It's funny because I ordered the burrito, or enchilada maybe, I don't know. And the DoorDash person comes all the way up the driveway and leaves it on the front porch. Okay? And so I go outside to grab it from the front porch. After I go outside, the door automatically closes. And it was in that very exact moment that I remember that the door automatically locks. And I had, I think, leggings, a shirt, my flannel, and socks. I did not have shoes on. And the door automatically closes. And so I'm locked outside. And so I text the neighbor. I had her number in case of emergencies. I texted her and I was like, hey, like, would you happen to have a key to the house? Because she kind of lived in their like mother-in-law suite. It wasn't like a neighbor, but she was very close by, and so I asked her like if she had a spare. Of course she didn't. Of course she didn't have a spare key. She was very nice though. She came over and like brought me shoes and another jacket and gloves and stuff. But that was after I had called the house owner, and she was like, well, you have to find the spare. And she was trying to explain to me that the spare was like on the other side of the house, in a little lockbox. So I'm like, okay, I can go to one area with just my socks in the snow, and then like I have to get on dry ground so I can like maybe warm my feet back up. And so I go to where I thought it was, and it wasn't there. And then I realized the lockbox that she's talking about is around the other side of the house where there's like a mountain of snow covering it. So there's absolutely no way that I'm going to get to that lockbox. And at this point, my feet are frozen and wet from walking through the snow to the other side of the house to try to find the key. So, and then the neighbor brings me shoes, which was really nice, and a jacket. And the house owners tell me that their daughter is coming to let me in the house. And so I'm standing outside. I'm standing outside in my little flannel and little shoes, and I'm waiting with my feet. My feet were numb at this point, couldn't feel them. And the daughter comes, and like I had seen pictures of her on the wall, but of course she's like drop dead gorgeous. Like, and she just looks at me and she's like, I'm so sorry. And then like lets me in the house, and I'm like, thank you for saving my life. And I walk inside, can't feel my feet at all. Couldn't feel my feet for like hours, but got in the house. She needed to come there anyways because she needed skis. Yeah, that was crazy. That was insane. They didn't give me a very good review, and I think that was why. But yeah, so I ended up leaving their place right before they got back, and I left it the same as I found it. But left Santa Fe and went up to Taos. All right, next part 3, I think this will be. Or I'll just continue from part 3. But yeah, so I ended up leaving the place that I was house sitting for and drove up to Taos. I had a plan of things that I had been wanting to do on my way up to Taos. So I left Santa Fe, and the first thing that I did on my way up to Taos through the pass was I went to the church. I believe it's the church of it's in Chamoy, New Mexico. And I forget the actual name of the church. But I was really excited to go to this church because prior to this, I had a drawing of what I thought was the church. I drew a picture of like the front of this building randomly and like what it looked like. And when I looked online at like things in New Mexico that you can go to, that like church came up, and I was like, wow, it looks really similar. It did look similar. I don't think it was the place in the drawing though, and I still don't know where that is, so that is interesting. The church was really nice. It was beautiful outside and around the church. I walked around, I took photos. I did go into the main church, and they're supposed to have this like holy dirt at the church, and they have that because New Mexico used to be, well, it kind of still is a desert, but it used to just be dirt, and so they used to call the dirt, it's in Spanish, but it's holy dirt. So they're supposed to have some of that in that church. I did not see it though. But I went into the church, I sat down, there were people praying and very much into their religious practice in there. And so I just sat down, I witnessed a little bit, and then I left. It was a beautiful experience. I did feel a little bit out of place though. And then after that, I continued up through the pass over into Taos. And so the Taos is like, there's a main highway, and that has like hotels and like bigger stores and stuff. And then you get to that's where like the beauty is. It's like an art district basically, but it's just beyond gorgeous. My first stop was the Hanuman Temple, which is a Buddhist temple. And the reason why I went there was because of Ram Dass and because of his book. I don't know if people watching have read that book or seen it. It's the book that says "Be Here Now" on the front, and it looks like a really crazy like map. The whole book has like insane art inside of it, and it's just beautiful. I've had that book for a while, and it came up for me quite a bit. But yeah, so the guru that the temple honors, forgive me if I'm saying this wrong, is Maharaji, and he was Ram Dass's guru, I believe, in India. So I went to that temple because I knew that I needed to, and I knew that it was really special for me. And I walked around quite a bit. I felt a little bit awkward because I wasn't really sure what to do with myself. I walked around the grounds for a little bit and kind of just checked it out to see what was there. In the back of the temple was this beautiful area where like there was a bridge, and then there's like water on the other side, like a lake, and then just beautiful nature. It did not look like something that would be in the desert. It was just incredible, crazy, incredible, beautiful. And then I went around to the temple and people were going inside, so I took off my shoes and I went inside and I sat down, and there wasn't really a service going on. It was just people praying to the shrine, and I just sat down, and it took me a little bit to get settled, but I closed my eyes and I just started to kind of meditate, and I definitely felt the presence of Maharaji there, and I just felt a very sweet and kind presence that was there, like to give me love, and being in that presence made me feel like getting a giant warm hug from a grandfather is what that felt like. It was really beautiful, and I wish that I could live that every single day. But that moment, being there in the presence of his energy and the temple's energy and everything, made me realize that this is what high vibrational feels like, and this is what being spiritual in high vibration feels like. And I'll get to this a little bit later into the story, but I wanted to live there, and I realized that I wanted to live there because it was so high vibrational and beautiful. But because I had to like come back to Oregon, I needed to carry that high vibrational energy with me. I needed to bring it here. And I'll get to how that manifested, but because I had to like come back to Oregon, I needed to carry that high vibrational energy with me. I needed to bring it here. And I'll get to how that manifested, but I left the temple and I'm trying to remember. I went to a couple of art galleries. I walked around a little bit. I don't remember where I ate that first night. They did have really good food, but I ended up staying at this little hotel along the highway area. I just saw 444, but I ended up staying there, and I had a really good night with myself. Just like, that night was when I decided that I wanted to start researching if I could stay there, if I could stay in Taos, because when I got there, I was like, this feels like home. Like, this feels like where I need to be and where I should be. And so I started like researching where I could live and where I could work and that sort of thing. And I was like, okay, like this could work out if like I could live here if I got a loan, or if I got a job really quick or whatever. And then I started to like plan it, and then I was like, wait, I'm getting way too ahead of myself. And so I planned out some things because I couldn't help myself. That's just how I am. Like, as soon as I have an idea or have my mind set to something, I need to research it and I need to like figure it out. But I eventually got some snacks, got cozy, went to bed. The next day, I tried to get a loan so that I could live there and move there. And it did not end up working out because I didn't have residency, which makes sense. I would have had to have a New Mexico address. Didn't research that part very, very well. But so that day I ended up like, I was stressing about it a little bit, but I decided that I was just going to enjoy the city, and there were a lot of things that I wanted to see. So I went through a couple more art galleries. I ended up, I believe I had breakfast by myself at this beautiful little cafe, and it felt so good to like take myself on a little breakfast date and enjoy it in that sense. And then that night I started to kind of have more anxiety and stress because I didn't know what I was going to do, because I really wanted to stay there, but I wasn't sure how I was going to do that. And because I was so excited, I didn't like prepare enough. And then that night I ended up booking the hotel really late, but I ended up staying at the Taos Ski Lodge, which was pretty far up into the mountains. And as I said before, the elevation was really bad, and I was not adjusted. It was like every time I got adjusted to the elevation, I went higher in elevation. So it just like kept getting harder to breathe. But the ski valley was beautiful. I went up there at night, so I couldn't see anything the sun was still up. But after I got settled I slept in like a cabin, which was really cool. And then I woke up in the morning and you could see like the mountain that everyone skis on, like the snow. And then you could see, and it was empty because it was off season, so like you could see everything. But it was gorgeous. And it was interesting because I like low-key felt like I was probably one of the only people there, which was crazy. But that cabin was really nice. And then the next day, I went down back into Taos to figure some other things out, and like was still brainstorming if I was going to stay there or not. And then I went by the river, and this was like one of my favorite parts because I just like I went by the river and I sat there, and it was like off of the side of the road though, and the road was really busy, and it was a little bit dangerous. But I still went, and I like went down to the river, and I sat with a tree, and it was gorgeous to like sit there in nature. And I was like, it would be so wonderful to just stay here, because it literally had everything that I wanted. It was beautiful. And then after that, I went driving around town a little bit, and I went to a crystal shop that I loved, and then I went to a bookstore. I parked my car, my new car, outside of the bookstore, went into the bookstore for like an hour and looked around and like got all of these books that I really loved. And then I get out of the bookstore and I get into my car, and my car isn't starting. And this is when the story starts to go downhill. I left off with coming out from the bookstore and my car being disabled. So this car, this SUV that I got, was from a dealership, and it was new, and I got it like a week before I left. I didn't tell them that I was going anywhere because everything was finalized, and I didn't think that like that I needed to. Like, you don't normally like keep in contact with your car dealership, you keep in contact with the bank that you're paying. But my car was disabled, so I called them, and they were like, hey, are you in New Mexico? And I was like, yeah, I'm on vacation. And they were like, well, you can't do that. And I was like, what do you mean I can't do that? And they thought that because I was on vacation that I wasn't going to make my car payments, but it was just, and I'm not gonna name drop, but it was weird that they were concerned instead of the bank being concerned. I don't know. I kind of communicated with the bank, but they were also like really crappy and not very easy to talk to. They didn't really care at all. They didn't care at all about me or my situation or what was going on, because it took me the entire day, literally until the sun was down, to get them to turn my car back on. And the only way they would turn it back on is if I agreed to bring it back to Oregon, because they thought that I wasn't going to make my car payments. And I tried to fight it, and they didn't believe me, probably because I'm a woman. But they told me I had to bring my car back within the next like 3 or 4 days, or else it was going to be disabled again and I would be charged for it. So it took us all day to get them to make my car go again. I think I would have been fine like staying at a hotel there, but like it was scary. Like, I was scared that my car was going to turn off. So at that point it set in that I wasn't going to be able to stay there, and that I had to go back. The risk was greater than the reward, for sure, because I would have had to pay the fees, I would have had to pay for the car, it would have been insane, an insane amount of debt. So I ended up leaving Taos that night, and I remember watching the sunset as I'm leaving and just sobbing. I shouldn't have been driving and crying that hard, but I cried all night. Like, there was no like holding back the emotions, because it was like I had this brand new, beautiful, shiny thing in my hands, literally in my hands, and I was ready to take it, and I was ready for it to be mine, and then it just got taken away from me. And that triggered a lot of childhood wounds. That triggered a lot within me, because when I put my mind to something, when I want something and then it doesn't work out, I get really upset, as I'm sure that like most people watching this do. It was really upsetting. I drove past this tree that I had been trying to find the previous days. It was they called it like the spirit tree. And there were a lot of photographs of it around the town and online, because it was just really beautiful. But yeah, so I started heading out, and my family, I was in contact with my family. They knew the whole situation. My mom helped me with hotels on the way back. I ended up staying in Santa Fe that night, and that night is when I really started paying attention to nervous system regulation. I ended up stumbling on a video online about nervous system regulation and EFT tapping, I believe it's called, and I tried it, and that was the only thing that calmed me down that night was tapping. So I still do that from time to time, but it saved me that night, and I was truly heartbroken. And but I do have a quick like spring back to these things, and I was like, you know what, it's just not meant to be right now. Hopefully I can live here in the future, but right now it's not meant to happen, and that's okay. There were a lot more things that came up where it was good that I ended up coming back. But I'll get there. So I stayed in Santa Fe that night, and then the next day I was like, you know what, before I leave New Mexico, because that day I was going out of New Mexico, I was like, I might as well do what I need to do, like what I came here for. So I went to a couple more shops. The last stop I made was at the Georgia O'Keeffe, was the artist art gallery that I went to. And I went there because my grandmother is a painter and an artist, and I went there because I needed to get something from that art gallery for her, because she loves the art so much. And I did look around at a few things, but my main goal was just to get something for her. And then I was out of there. Coincidentally enough, on my way outside of New Mexico, I was stuck in a bunch of traffic, and there was a trucker behind me with a tiny little baby puppy, like newborn puppy. And again, with like newborn animals, I need to look that up, but something about puppies and kittens on this trip were very relevant. So I ended up like hanging out with him and his puppy for a little bit, because we had nowhere to go, nothing to do, and I just said hi. And then continued my way out of New Mexico. I went from New Mexico to Arizona, and the way back was very rushed. I don't think I stopped for really anything on my way back. Went to Arizona, and then the next day I drove all the way through California up to Northern California, as far as I could go. I drove maybe like 9-10 hours each day. It was a lot. I was exhausted. By that night that I got to Northern California, I was so out of it. And I was really anxious because sometimes I get like tired and out of it and anxious. But I stayed in a nice hotel, and it ended up working out just fine. And the next day I drove all the way back home. It was a really fast trip back, and I didn't stop anywhere, but I did have a lot of realizations that I'm going to go over in like my last part, like final wrap up that I'm going to do. Okay. All right. So in my last video, I wrapped up talking about my trip. So in this video, I am going to go over some things that I learned from this whole experience. So the reason why I titled it as a ego death and rebirth is because when I left Oregon, I was very determined to leave, and right before I left, I remember feeling like there were parts of me actually like dying, and I remember actually like physically feeling that way, which is really terrifying and really disassociating a lot. I did have my family, but I didn't have very many friends at the time, and so I really was on my own, and I made this decision pretty much on my own. I did have my friends that were like going to move, but that was a little bit different. I didn't have any spiritual friends. I didn't have any friends that like really understood me or like what I was going through, but I do now. But I definitely learned that with decisions like this, even if I feel like I have enough funds, even if I feel like I am ready, I really need to think about like letting go of expectations and letting go of the outcome of the situation. Because if I had gone into that experience with no expectation of like if I was going to live there or stay there, and like not making up my mind about staying there before I actually like did enough research, then it probably just would have worked out better and I would have been less heartbroken. I have like worked a lot on forgiving myself for that though, because I got so excited. Taos is beautiful. If you've ever been there, please let me know. If you ever get the chance to go there, you should. It is a beautiful, artistic town with beautiful nature, and it's gorgeous. I learned that I really enjoy my own company. I really enjoy traveling by myself. I really enjoy driving by myself. I also just really enjoy driving in general. And so driving those long days, it was exhausting, but it wasn't as difficult as I thought it would be. This whole entire trip helped me connect to spirit so much deeper, and I came back very different from how I left. And I think that I came back an even more raw version of myself. I'm still peeling back layers, but that, the version of myself that I came back with she came back knowing a lot more than when she left, which I'm sure makes sense, but, on my way back, on my way there, it was good. And like, I had a good time, but on my way back, the entire way back, I had so many like spiritual realizations, and I would say like the way back was my rebirth, because not only was I like coming back home, but I realized that I carried my grandmother with me, my grandmother on my my paternal grandmother. I carried her with me the entire time, and I reconnected with her on that trip. She came through when I was on my way back, and I connected deeper to my spirit guides and I connected deeper to my intuition. Another thing that I learned was that you can't formally and officially say goodbye to people, especially those that are like in your family. And you can't say goodbye to those people with the expectation of being gone for a long time, unless you actually know that you're going to be gone for a long time, if that makes sense. I said goodbye to my family and people that were here before I knew whether or not I was coming back. And while that did bring good closure, it also brought a lot of confusion, and it honestly made it more stressful for myself, because I spent a lot of time having to like over explain myself when I should have just like called it a vacation. And so like the main takeaway from this was letting go of expectations, and taking my time to like be prepared too was important, and not rushing would have been good. But I'm so grateful for this trip. I'm grateful that all of this happened, because if it didn't, I wouldn't have been able to see the things that I saw, and I also wouldn't know myself as deeply as I know myself now. So if you have the opportunity to travel alone, if you have the opportunity to travel anywhere alone, I highly recommend it. It was a beautiful experience. If you watch all these parts, thank you. I am honestly so grateful to anyone that watched any part of this. If you enjoyed it, if you resonated with any of it, please let me know. It was wonderful to share my story. Thank you for watching. I love you.